This is a how-to plan, a how-to video on what to do when God doesn't follow your plan. Interesting, right? Yeah. So sometimes I, in my mind, I always imagine that if God would relinquish the control of my life and give it to me, and say, Ben, here are the controls of your life. Run it the way you want it to go. Sometimes I imagine that I will do a better job than he did or that he does. You know that the control column for the pilots when they fly a plane. Sometimes in my life I feel like my life is in autopilot and the pilot has taken a break to go and grab a meal and the plane of my life is almost crashing and running aground. And I'm here sitting down as an innocent passenger watching my whole life crash. And it feels that. It feels that sometimes doors close that I would have wished to remain open. Sometimes what the plan that I had for my life seems to take so long. Like the one in control has got no idea of urgency or time or no sense of time. And sometimes I feel like, God, I know you have a plan for me and it's a good plan, but sometimes it doesn't feel that way. And so as I was thinking about those thoughts, God led me to a verse that I didn't know where it was, but I like to read for you guys. I love this verse so much. And it's in Isaiah 55 and from verse 9. Isaiah 55:9. And it says this: For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. Let me repeat. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. So a few years back, I had the privilege to take my very, very first flight. So it was a short flight from Nairobi to Kisumu, yeah. And when the plane took off, I marveled at the aerial view, and I kept on looking down and imagining life down there. And as we flew all the way, I marveled at what an interesting perspective. I'd never before imagined that what it would look like to look at the earth from above. It was a short, wonderful flight that I enjoyed really much. And so a few years later, I did the drive from Nairobi to Kisumu, and the drive was not as smooth as a flight or as short as a flight. In fact, there were valleys and hills, and there were bumps on the way, and curves, and borders, and markets, and wildlife, and cattle. And all these things were present on the way, on the road to Kisumu. And God brought this analogy to mind when I thought about this plan, my plan and God's plan, because He told me that, Ben, as high as the heavens, that's where I live, as high as they are above the earth. Just imagine how high are the heavens from the earth. That's how my ways are different from your ways. We are on the ground, literally, and God is up above in heaven. And God was telling me, Ben, for me, I have my plan for you is not a day-to-day mundane plan. My plan for you stretches lifetimes, and even posthumously, my plan for you continues. And that got me thinking, and imagining that of this character that I also read in the Bible that all of us know, and his name is Joseph. And Joseph, when he was a young lad, preteen, he dreams, grandiose dreams of the sun and the moon and the stars bowing down before him, of him being great. And he had this idea that my life will be great, I will do great things for God. And he loved God and served God. And when he was about 17 years old, as he's taking lunch to his brothers, they conspire against him and they throw him in a pit. Just imagine your own brothers doing that for you. On top of that, they pull him out and they sell him off, imagine, for money to a band of traders who are heading to Egypt. And I was imagining as Joseph is chained at the back of the camel walking, what are the thoughts that were running through his mind? Was he thinking that, oh God, where are you? Where is my God? Where is my life heading to? Maybe he was in school about to sit for his exam, and here he's off, a slave being sold off in a faraway land as a young Hebrew boy, plucked from his family so unfairly. And he's sold off in a slave market to an official named Potiphar, and he gets into his house and he's like, maybe this is my lot in life, and he busies himself and he does the very best, serving God as he serves men, and then here comes his wife, and she accuses him of rape. And Joseph is bundled into prison, accused falsely, and he's in prison, forgotten. And I was imagining what ran through his mind when he imagined, God, I've been serving you all my life, God, I've been faithful. God, I've put my life in your hands, and God, this is where it lands me, in prison. And and after that, Pharaoh has a dream, and he's carried off and brought into the presence of the king. And through his interpretation, he's appointed prime minister, not only saving Egypt during the famine, but the whole world and his family too, And God was telling me, Ben, that is the plan that I have for you. My plan doesn't involve the day-to-day mundane activities. My plan is higher because I have an aerial view of your life. I see your life from the beginning to its end, and even way after you die. And when I began to think about the story of Joseph, I was amazed because Joseph had to end up from Canaan to Egypt somehow. So even him being thrown into a pit, that was all part of God's plan, The random traders who passed by the Ishmaelites were not just random, they were handpicked by God. And they picked him and they sold him in the slave market. And that day, Potiphar maybe happened to walk by the market, and maybe he had no plan in his budget for a slave. And here he sees this young Hebrew boy, and he says, can I purchase him? And he buys him, and he brings him into his house. And even though as evil as it may look, Potiphar's wife was also part of God's plan. And I'll tell you why. Because Potiphar's wife had to accuse him falsely because he had to end up in prison. And not just any prison, the prison where Pharaoh kept his guards, the prison guard for Pharaoh's guard, so that he will come into contact with the wine bearer, Pharaoh's wine bearer, who will later on mention him to Pharaoh, and he will be brought before his presence. And you see, all these bad and good things, all of them were working towards an end. That Joseph in his day, living in his day, didn't have the luxury of reading the story like we have. He didn't know how it will end. He just lived every day blind like the rest of us. And now, because we have the gift of hindsight, we're able to see God's perspective of Joseph's life and how all of these things played towards the salvation of his family, And God was telling me, Ben, everything that is happening in your life, the good, the bad, and the ugly, everything is playing a part towards pushing you to the plan that I have for you. And sometimes I think about this way. What if God from heaven, he will stretch out his hand and hand me the autobiography of my life, the book of my life, Ben Kiruthi's autobiography, Imagine for me opening the pages and reading from the day I was born at the Aga Khan Hospital, all the way to my death and even after I die. And what will happen after I die? Just imagine how I will be impressed by it and how I will say, oh God, now I understand. God, now I trust you. God, now you can do whatever you want to do because God, that's the story of my life. But that doesn't take faith. God needs us to trust him even when we don't know how our life will end. And as I end this video, last week we happened to attend the funeral, and a funeral at Gathoni's side, and I heard the story of Gathoni's great-grandfather, an amazing man. So he was born pre-colonial, and during his youth, he was recruited by the colonialists to become a Christian, and he was part of spreading Christianity to his village then, and he served God his whole life till he died 50-something odd years ago, And when he died, He didn't have the hindsight that I have right now when I looked at his grave and I saw his family, his whole family tree, from his children to his grandchildren, to his great grandchildren, who is Gadoni, and spreading over to our children, who is Imani. I got to see the faithfulness of God and how him being faithful to God, how that has played a part. That now his family, so many people in his family are all busy serving God somewhere, including me here, you know. And God told me, Ben, you know, that is my plan. My plan is not as little as you are. My plan is higher than you because I get to see the end from the beginning. And as I end, I leave with this one verse that I love very much. And this verse is in Jeremiah, and it says this: For I know, I, not you, I know the plans that I have for you. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you a future and a hope. Till next time, guys, God bless.